Why did Jesus order 2,000 pigs to be thrown into the abyss instead of feeding the poor? This is a question that many who have read this story in the Bible have asked. I've been a Christian all my life, and it took me a long time to understand the complexity of this story, and it's much deeper than it seems. The darkness enveloped the boat as the waters of the Sea of Galilee began to churn. The cold wind sliced through the disciples' faces, and the rocking of the waves made every step within the vessel feel precarious. The sky, once calm, now rumbled with distant thunder, heralding something overwhelming. Suddenly, a violent storm struck them. The furious sea tossed the small boat from side to side, and the disciples, gripped by fear, cried out for help. Yet Jesus slept peacefully. With trembling voices, they woke him. "Master, we're going to perish." He rose, looked at the storm, and commanded, "Be still." Instantly the wind ceased, and the waters became calm. They arrived in the region of the Gerasenes, a Gentile territory. On the shore, hills and pastures held hundreds of pigs, unclean animals to the Jews, but raised here as a means of livelihood. The boat touched the shore, and a strange silence hung in the air. The sound of gentle waves contrasted with the unsettled look in the disciples' eyes. Before they could orient themselves in this unfamiliar land, a scream shattered the calm. From among the tombs, a man appeared, running toward them, his wild and terrifying appearance. He lived among the graves, rejected and feared by all. They had tried to restrain him with chains and shackles, but nothing was strong enough to hold him. With superhuman strength, he shattered every bond. Day and night, he wandered the mountains and tombs, shouting, his voice mingling with the wind as he cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus, he ran desperately and threw himself at his feet. His voice was not just his own, but something speaking through him. "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Do not torment me," he cried, trembling. Jesus, undeterred, commanded the spirit to leave. "What is your name?" he asked. The reply came ominously, "Legion, for we are many." The demons, fearing their destruction, begged to be sent into the pigs grazing on the hillside. Jesus permitted them. In that instant, the herd went wild. Screaming and running uncontrollably, the 2,000 pigs plunged into the cliff and disappeared into the waters of the lake. If you're enjoying this content, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's return to the video. The water still churned where the pigs had vanished, as an uncomfortable silence took over the place. The herders, horrified by what they had witnessed, didn't wait to understand what had happened. They fled in haste, running towards the village and the nearby fields. Their words, cut short by fear, spread quickly. Soon, a crowd gathered, eager to see for themselves what had occurred. When they arrived, they saw something impossible to ignore. The man who had once wandered among the tombs, shouting and harming himself, was now sitting at Jesus' feet. Dressed and serene, his expression no longer carried the madness everyone had known. But instead of relief, the people felt fear. How could this man be transformed? What had happened here? The witnesses recounted everything: the encounter with Jesus, the demons, the pigs plunging into the lake. The impact of the story spread fear. With hearts filled with dread, the townspeople begged Jesus to leave. They didn't want to face something so profound and unknown. Without question, Jesus complied. He climbed into the boat and prepared to leave. The healed man ran to him, begging to follow. But Jesus refused. "Go back to your home and tell what God has done for you." The man obeyed, and his story would echo throughout the region. As the crowd still tried to comprehend what had happened, one undeniable detail remained. The demons recognized Jesus before anyone else in that place. They called him by name and title, a name few dared to speak. "Son of the Most High God," they shouted, not in worship, but in desperation. They knew they were standing before the light that would invade their darkness. They knew Jesus, his power and his authority. Yet despite this knowledge, they remained demons. Recognizing who he was did not transform them because their nature was one of opposition. This recognition without change revealed something unsettling. It is possible to recognize Jesus and still reject him. The title Son of God wasn't merely an acknowledgement of his strength, but of his identity as the Messiah. It wasn't a compliment, but a forced declaration of truth. In Jesus' presence, lies fell away, and even those who hated him were compelled to acknowledge who he truly was. The question they asked, "Have you come here to torment us before the time?" revealed deep fear. They knew the day of final judgment was coming, and their condemnation was certain. But Jesus was there earlier than expected. Their time was running out. The very existence of that question confirmed that Jesus was the judge. They didn't fear a prophet or a mere teacher. They feared the one who had the power to decide their eternal fate. And there before them, the judge had already begun his work. The demons knew their time was short. There was a set day for the final judgment, and they had no doubt about it. The fear didn't come from the unknown, but from the certainty of their impending doom. The question they posed to Jesus wasn't a challenge, but a recognition that he had the power to hasten their condemnation. In desperation, they begged to be sent into the pigs. They didn't want to be cast into the abyss, and Jesus, in his authority, allowed it. Not because he needed to bargain with them, but because his action fulfilled a greater purpose. He was casting them out of the man, but making it clear that evil still existed and would be completely eradicated in due time. As soon as the unclean spirits entered the pigs, the herd went mad. In a frenzy, the 2,000 animals ran uncontrollably to the cliff and plunged into the sea. What had once been a source of sustenance for the Gentiles was now nothing more than a trail of destruction. The scene carried a profound irony. The pigs, unclean according to the Torah, became vessels for the demons. Their death sealed the man's liberation, but it also served as a reminder that evil still had space until the final judgment was fulfilled. Jesus had already faced Satan in the desert. At that moment, the devil tempted him with promises of glory and immediate dominion, but Jesus didn't yield. He rejected each offer, remaining faithful to the Father's will. Now the demons tried something different. They weren't challenging Jesus, but pleading. Their request to enter the pigs revealed that even knowing they couldn't win, they sought to at least mitigate their defeat. The Jews viewed pigs as unclean, unworthy creatures. To them, the fact that the demons wanted to enter these animals seemed fitting. It was as if they were being cast into something already representing defilement. This echoed Jesus' own words in Matthew 7:6, "Do not give what is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine." The pigs were symbols of those who rejected the truth and lived according to carnal desires, just like the demons who could never be redeemed. But the death of the pigs had an immediate and real impact. They weren't just animals wandering the hillside. They were part of the local economy. That herd belonged to someone, and its loss represented significant financial damage. It wasn't just a spiritual matter, it was an economic one. For many in the town, this would become the true reason to reject Jesus. They wouldn't see the miracle, only the material loss. The demons knew this. Their aim was never just to find new bodies to inhabit. They wanted to destroy. By choosing the pigs, they not only prolonged their existence in this world, but also caused disorder and revolt against Jesus. They knew that if they couldn't stop the man's liberation, they could at least turn that miracle into a cause for scandal and division. What happened that day wasn't just an act of expulsion, it was a reminder that even defeated evil always seeks ways to leave its mark and sow division. The impact of the pigs' destruction quickly spread. The village was in turmoil. People rushed in, some still skeptical about the herders' accounts, but when they saw the lake swallowing the last remnants of the herd, There were no more doubts. What had happened here was real. However, instead of celebrating the man's freedom, their eyes were fixated on the loss of the animals. The Gentiles in that region didn't see Jesus as a savior, but as someone who brought them loss. The liberation of a man possessed by a legion of demons should have been a cause for rejoicing, but it wasn't. They preferred the pigs over transformation. Their livelihood meant more than the miracle before their very eyes. The local economy had been shaken. The herd of pigs represented wealth, trade, and stability. Now, all that was gone. For them, Jesus wasn't a liberator, he was a problem. His presence meant risk, and risk was unacceptable. It didn't matter that a man had been restored. What mattered was the financial impact. So they made a decision. They went to Jesus and asked him to leave. They didn't want more miracles. They didn't want his message. They feared what more he might change. Jesus' presence challenged their priorities and forced them to look beyond what they were willing to see. This story isn't just about the Gentiles of that town. Often people still choose the temporary over the eternal. Sin offers temporary security, fleeting pleasures, while the truth of God demands renunciation and transformation. Jesus climbed into the boat, ready to leave. The town that should have marveled at the miracle chose to reject him. They didn't want change. They didn't want to lose anything else. It was easier to keep everything as it was than to allow God's presence to transform their lives. But that scene wasn't just a reflection of the city of Gerasa. It was a portrait of the human heart. The Bible shows how we resist the idea of God removing sin from our lives, especially when it demands sacrifice. For many, sin brings comfort, status, or material gain. Letting go of that seems like too great a sacrifice. Just as the Gentiles clung to their possessions, many prefer to hold on to habits and choices that keep them distant from God. Jesus was clear when he said, "No one can serve two masters." It's not possible to love God and at the same time live for money and worldly pleasures. The people of Gerasa chose the earthly. They preferred the temporary security of their economy over the freedom that Jesus offered. In Romans 12, Paul warns Christians not to conform to the patterns of this world. God's calling is for deep transformation, a renewal of the mind, but that change only happens when we choose God's will above all else. Resisting sin and allowing that transformation is the only way to discern what God desires for our lives. Strengthening faith requires decisions that the world doesn't understand. After all, who would choose to lose pigs rather than gain the truth? The boat pulled away from the shore, and the disciples watched in silence. Jesus had been rejected, not by Pharisees or Jewish priests, but by Gentiles who didn't want his presence there. The scene made it clear that opposition to Christ isn't just a matter of ethnicity or culture. It's about how each person responds to the truth he brings. From the beginning, Jesus' ministry wasn't confined to the Jews. Although he came first for Israel, his message crossed boundaries. The rejection he faced in Gerasa proved that resistance to the gospel wasn't limited to one people. It wasn't a matter of dissent, but of the heart. Paul explains this in Ephesians 2. There was once a separation between Jews and Gentiles, a barrier that divided them, but Christ came to tear down that wall. He didn't only bring salvation to the Jews, he created a new people in himself, where origin didn't matter, only faith. The inclusion of the Gentiles in salvation shows the greatness of God's love. He didn't choose one group, but opened the way for all. The invitation was universal, available to anyone willing to receive it. In Acts 10, Peter has a vision that changes his understanding. He realizes that God doesn't show favoritism. The gospel isn't just for the Jews, it's for all people. The call to repentance and salvation extends beyond any human-made barrier. And even today, the response to this call remains the only difference that truly matters. If you enjoyed this content and want to continue exploring the hidden mysteries and stories of the Bible, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel. This helps us bring you more videos like this and reach more people interested in the Bible. Turn on notifications so you don't miss out on upcoming content and share this video with friends who might like it. See you next time.